Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis Podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, member Odyssey 2112 shares how he survived a monstrous debt load, horrible timing, and some unforgiving industries, including investment banking at Jefferies and an internal corporate role at Barclays. One wise piece of advice on what you should optimize for, and some humorous stories along the way. Enjoy. Odyssey 2112, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Patrick. It's a pleasure and an honor to be in your presence.
So just for clarity, that's Odyssey without the E, but it'd be great if you could give the listeners a quick summary of your bio.
Yeah, so I'm a second-generation South Asian male. My parents immigrated here in the 70s to Long Island, New York. So I was born and raised there, grew up a pretty typical lifestyle. Was really into music and economics and finance. I was actually pretty dorky, in elementary school, where I would, I really was fascinated by like basketball and baseball stats. So I'd actually make up my own players and create stat sheets on them on paper,
Nice.
Which is really, really dorky. But I knew I always really liked numbers and calculating things and selling and talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what helped me gravitate towards business and finance. My dad's a doctor, so I always saw him.
Mine too.
Work with his patient. Yeah. What kind of doctor?
Cardiologist.
My dad's an endocrinologist.
Nice.
Yeah, so very similar.
Yeah.
So I've got some early memories of just spending time with my dad in his office and just talking to the patients and making them feel better. Because I would, go to work with my mom and dad, and it was kind of like I didn't want to go to the babysitter, so I just spent time with my mom and dad at work.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, I was always inclined towards music and math and economics and history, and so a lot of analytical stuff. And I was always pretty intense, pretty serious. I took myself really seriously a lot. So
I think that's pretty typical for young. Sorry? It's pretty typical for young males in finance.
Yeah, exactly. We think we know the right answer.
We think we know everything. Yeah, so that's fair. That was similar to me when I was graduating.
Yeah. And then the decision came to school, and my when I was applying to schools, I was given the ability to go to whatever school I wanted, and there was a big thing in my family. Because I'm the youngest of three brothers, and by far, so I'm like 10 years younger than my elder brothers.
Got it.
And my brothers, they had actually made a lot of sacrifices when they were making their college decisions, because my mom was terminally ill. And she actually passed away when I was 11. So that was probably like a key watershed moment for me. But what my brothers really and my dad wanted from me most was get the best education you can. And so it was a bit of an emotional decision in going to Stern, where I was academically strong. I had, above a 1400 on my SATs. I was, an A minus student.
Yeah.
But I wasn't necessarily like the valedictorian in my class. I was like, I used to play guitar. I used to go.
You were well balanced. You didn't just do academics.
Exactly. I was pretty well balanced and had a lot of different interests, and, thought finance was like a good pathway in. But the financing decision that I don't regret, but coming in, that I want WSO readers, viewers to think about is, make the right financing decision about undergrad, because I basically went on full loan, and so I started my journey.
And
undergrad.
NYU's expensive, man. It's expensive there, right? Like 50.
Yeah,
back then it was like 50K, 60K.
Now it's like 60, 70 all in per year. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
When I was there, it was like 35, 40 all in. So it was a big decision for the family, but it was an emotional thing, and it was like, the Odyssey 2112. You have to you have to go for what's best for you. So I came into Stern saying, look, I know finance at a high level. I feel like I'll figure it out. I went in with an assumption of saying, look, I would want to have a more balanced college experience, but have the weight of Stern behind me to kind of take me where I needed to go.
That's fair.
That was the initial intent.
So like you kind of knew you were going to go finance from the beginning, from when you went to undergrad. You were taking on a lot of debt. You're like, hey, I need to get a job right when I get out. And then the worst possible timing happens, financial crisis, right when you're in your junior year?
Yeah. I mean, like we started hearing about, Bear Stearns failing, the spring of my junior year, where we're basically in Hong Kong for an international study project, and our TA, who was signed on for Bear Stearns Equity Research as a experienced associate, he just kind of got laid off because his offer got rescinded. So we started hearing that a lot.
Yeah.
And our year, I don't want to be biased, but our year, we had a lot of really smart folks, and people started getting pretty nervous. And back to your question about, what I wanted to get out of school, I came into school actually thinking I'd want to do like econ and international business, something a little bit more high level. I didn't even know that Stern was so well suited in finance, and I didn't really think that I wanted to do like hardcore finance or investment banking. I thought, I could do something in public finance or municipal finance. So I didn't really have a plan set. And so that kind of threw things a little bit in the grinder for me too, because I didn't necessarily use my undergrad experience to its fullest extent. That being said, I did finance and accounting. I got pretty good internships, but my summer internship at Citi was pretty bad. We had less than 20% retention of interns. We had people getting laid off left and right. I mean, the guy who was first year analyst who was training me basically got laid off the first week that I was at my summer internship.
Jeez.
So it was real. Like the struggle was real for everybody at that time.
Yeah, no, seriously. I can't even imagine. It must have been stressful. But so you're doing your internship. Most of the people don't get a return offer. So you're coming into senior year. What's the thought process? Like just scramble, get anything you can?
Yeah. I mean, I think, because I had like a public finance background, it was really tough to make the transition into corporate finance. I mean, I was up against folks who had started internships from their freshman and sophomore year. I was up against people who just really lived, ate, and breathed finance at Stern, and people were ultimately really, really competitive. I just thought that it would just create a lot of negative vibes about people.
Yeah.
And particularly for me, it was more like, okay, like you're not investing in any relationships, you're really investing in yourself, and you're just really being cutthroat about it. And Stern has that notorious
reputation,
kind of shtick. Yeah, it's got that reputation for being that kind of place, and it was just kind of accentuated. So it was definitely very challenging. I think the saving grace for me in my senior year was that I was like the head of a school organization that was making a lot of impact from a humanitarian perspective. I met my future wife then, and I told myself that I have to be patient with myself, and I have to kind of give myself more leniency if I'm going to get out of this, right? I had to be my own advocate, right? And,
get out of this, meaning like getting out of the debt, you mean? Or getting out of...
Yeah, getting out of the debt. Yeah, getting out of the debt. I mean, I was fine as a student. I was always like a, 3.5 student, 3.4, 3.5 student. It was more about, okay, like I have this like really big thing ahead of me. I have $140,000 of debt staring me in the face. How am I going to get myself serious about things? And so that was kind of like, starting from point zero. So there was times where I said, I should think about being a paralegal. I should think about, just starting things from scratch. I should, just really start from a very, very bare bones perspective, because I think, it also comes down to your personality, right? I'm more of a high level strategic thinker. I really am excited about ideas and moving things and influencing people and being more of a coach and strategist, as opposed to, okay, I need to be able to go through like 100 tab Excel model and understand all the mistakes in there. That's just not my personality, right?
Fair.
So it was come to terms with a lot of those different things. But a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, got me into an offer at an internal corporate finance and franchising company called Edible Arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really cool opportunity where I was able to work directly with the CEO and his family. And I think it's a big spoiler for me because I've always worked with like C-suites. I've always had that, C-suite exposure.
Yeah.
I think it's partly because I've always been exposed to, older siblings, and I can walk and talk a little bit more maturely than people, and I look a little bit more mature than people.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, tasked with, doing a lot of restructuring work and corporate strategy work at a company that was in the middle of Bumble F, Connecticut.
Yeah.
But I really cut my teeth there because it gave me confidence, right?
And
like,
so tell me,
CEO of a Edible Arrangements.
You said you got a friend helped you get that. What explain to me that? Like, how did they just? I mean, it was a really tough time to get a job. So tell me how that happened.
Yeah.
Was it an intro and an interview process?
I think at those times that are tough, you have to really leverage your network and your relationships, right? So this friend of mine was sitting in Connecticut. He was basically a part-time paralegal for Edible Arrangements, and he was going to law school at UConn. Like that was literally what he was.
Okay.
But he was 2 years my senior from NYU, and him and I had really get to know each other, when we were in the city. So he graduated in 2007.
Yeah.
I was graduating in 2009. We'd really cultivated that relationship through college. So he did me a really big favor. I mean, my job offer was a joke. It was $40,000, right? It wasn't like anything impressive, right? But I had to get myself in the door with regards to corporate finance, right? So, I mean, the takeaway from there really for anybody who's listening to this is that you really have to have a really good plan, and you have to kind of lay out that plan, through plan A, B, C. And nobody could have kind of imagined what the financial crisis would have brought forward. But still, like, I think, I'm not regretting anything that happened because I'm a firm believer that things fall into place, but you have to have a plan of contingency. And there were a lot of times where I took offers that I probably shouldn't have taken, and things that I didn't do that I probably should have, but usually it's all part of the learning process of becoming. So. For
sure. So you're at this firm for about a year, and tell me about what the thought process of why you started looking. Was it because it was the middle of nowhere in Connecticut? Was it because you felt like you weren't growing enough, or you just felt like at that point, hey, the pay's too low, I really need to try and get a banking gig. Things are improving with the economy a little bit. Let me see if I can try it. Or like, tell me a little bit about that thought process and that process, that recruiting step that you made.
Yeah. So I think the thought process there was, I've studied corporate finance. I've spent a lot of money. I am also getting married because I met this really amazing girl, in the end of 2008, and our families really like each other. And
mm-hmm.
I really miss New York. It was a lot of everything, right? It was give my degree a full shot, A, B, believe in myself and believe in what I need to get done. And it wasn't just that I need to pay off these loans, but it was more like investment banking is the right platform to springboard off of anything after that. I really was a firm believer in that based off my research.
Mm-hmm.
It was either that or consulting, but I really felt good about banking because I was enjoying like the corporate finance side of things after kind of my experience at Edible Arrangements.
Cool.
So it was a combination of those things, and I felt like I had the motor to do it. And so I interviewed at a few banks. Actually, I didn't really interview at all. It was literally all my relationships because there was a guy in the marketing team at Edible Arrangements who I just developed a good relationship with, and I was just communicating my frustrations with what was going on at this small company. We had a couple of good conversations. He said, "Hey, look, one of my nieces is connected to somebody at Jefferies. Maybe I could shoot your resume over." It turned out that woman who was the connect at Jefferies was also a Stern alum, and she knew a lot of my old friends from Stern too. And I just got pulled into Jefferies given the fact that it was a very strong Stern network. And Jefferies was known to be a little bit more scrappy, and it was willing to invest in people, as opposed to being, we need the guys and girls who are 3.9 GPAs and who have, immaculate modeling skills and all that stuff. So it was known to be a scrappy bank. And at that time, it was actually a really interesting time for Jefferies where, because Lehman had collapsed, Jefferies was marketing itself as kind of the only pure play investment bank left on Wall Street. And they were riding on the coattails of inheriting a lot of the old UBS people like Bill Lorello and or all those other kind of ex-UBS guys. And it was kind of that exodus that built out Moelis and Jefferies and Green Tech Capital Advisors. So really interesting time at Wall Street at that point. So I interviewed with a couple of teams, and I took the first team that accepted me, which was the maritime team.
Okay.
Which is shipping investment banking.
Okay.
And so I'm 23. I'm looking at. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So go ahead, continue. So you do a couple of years there. So how was that?
Yeah. So I'm 20. Yeah, I'm 23, and I'm saying, okay, I got an investment banking job. I'm working with a very specialized team of kind of like mad scientists who know how to talk to Nordic and Greek ship owning companies and making them feel like they don't know anything. So very specialized, but also very very nice people. Some people, there's a bad stick on Wall Street that says that you usually are stuck with people who are type A's, or they don't really care for your well-being. I came into a place at Jefferies where the team that I was part of was very, very accommodating. My SVP at that time was a phenomenal person, and he's written on my LinkedIn. He understand my what was on my plate. I told him I was getting married. He looked at me like, "You're crazy. You're 23. You don't have your whole life ahead of you." But there were just some things that just kind of aligned, and I'm always a firm believer in saying, don't force against the momentum. If things are happening, just let them evolve.
Yeah.
So I was getting married in July 2010. I get this offer in April 2010. I'm excited about the fact that the base is like 80% higher than what I was making, and then there's the potential for bonus.
Right. And
it was a foot in the door on Wall Street. It wasn't the end of the road for me,
mm-hmm.
but it was okay. What do I get out of this? So that 2-year experience was a phenomenal ride.
What were your hours like? And how did your bonuses turn out? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, so hours were, anywhere from 60 to 90 or even 100 at times, right?
Yep.
Bonuses turned out to be pretty good, like 70, 80, 90% of my salary.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, I got a lot of credit for, being very conscientious and being a really good worker for them and really sticking to it to learn the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, I took away from that is I knew that I was very flexible. Like I had just learned, in 2007, 2008, I learned a lot about the public finance infrastructure of how to raise municipal bonds. And then in 2009, I learned about the franchising business. And now in 2010, I'm learning about the shipping business.
Yeah.
And it's all more international. It's macro. It's tied to the oil and gas markets. It's tied to underlying commodity markets. So I'm just getting really enriched. And so I'm just loving it, right? Because I'm feeling like the
learning curve's not flattening out at any point, really. You're just kind of soaking it all in.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm soaking it all in, and I'm just enjoying the experience. So,
So when did you feel like was a good time to start looking, or when did you feel like, was it because the learning curve was flattening? Was it because you just started getting hit up by a lot of recruiters as the economy kept heating up and getting better? As we went from 2010 to 2012, 13, things started getting a little bit better at that point. Can you tell me kind of what the thought process was of kind of what your next step was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was already 2 years into my marriage. I would, be commuting every day, and I would be on the black car, and I had gained a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
I was like 200 pounds almost, and my typical weight was like 165, 170.
Yeah.
I had managed to keep my marriage together, those first 2 years,
easy.
despite not seeing my wife a lot. And I was always my decision-making process was not always about, hey, I have to prioritize my career right now. It was about making sure the career fit with my family and my overall wellness, and making sure that I could see my dad, who was living in Long Island, and I could commute back to kind of make sure he was doing okay. He was a widower for 20 years, so we always had this thing in our family that we need to kind of keep ourselves together.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those things that kind of influenced my decision-making process about not staying in banking at that point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of people aren't willing to kind of make that. That's a really tough sacrifice to make, like, especially you were married so young. So it's like, I can understand it's really got to be rough on your significant others if you're working those, 80 plus hour weeks pretty consistently. So when you were thinking about this, was it like a discussion with your wife? Was it something where you guys are just, you started kind of saying, well, this isn't working, that the commute's brutal, let me start thinking of other options? Or did you start talking to your network? How did you kind of figure out your next step? Because you still stayed in finance, but it was kind of a pivot a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think my goal was to say, look, within 2 years, I paid off all my debt. I was really happy about that.
Yeah.
I was really happy to be at zero.
At zero.
In terms of my net, in terms of my net worth.
Yeah.
Right. By August 2012, I was really, really happy about that. But the decision process was more multifaceted. It was more about, look, I still have a lot to learn, and I think I was still excited about the prospect of just being an explorer and seeing different sides of the coin and leveraging what I learned from one piece and trying to take it to the other side.
Did you ever feel like jumping around from to different things like this though would hurt you? Like, did you ever have that sense of like, well, maybe it'd be better if I just stayed and just went all the way up? What gave you the confidence to kind of be almost more entrepreneurial with your career?
Yeah, I think what gave me the confidence to do that was, like, I really need to focus on my happidness and my wellness and other sides of the equation. Like work was one part of my identity, so to speak. Like, I had other identities that I played to.
Yeah,
that make up who I am, right? Like, there was always a point of transition, and like, I'm always the type of guy that likes to eat something up and kind of gnaw at it and then just kind of move on from there. Like, that's just my personality.
Okay, that's fair.
And so the other part of it was that when I was looking at the senior bankers at Jefferies, it was like, these guys are just glorified salesmen, right? There's nothing that differentiates a banker from a real estate agent, right?
Fair.
And I didn't want to be that person. I mean, I think, seeing like the advances in technology, seeing the way trends were shifting, it wasn't that I felt like investment banking was going to die, but I felt that, like, what am I going to keep on doing all day long? I'm just going to keep on like selling stuff to people. And, even when I was at Jefferies, like, the companies that we were dealing with, a lot of the deals that we did ended up hurting those companies.
Ended up hurting those
right?
companies, you're saying, eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, the deals that we did for them, like, they eventually just like kind of were.
Why do you think that
transactions that kind of.
Just because like there were acquisitions that just weren't a good fit or whatnot, or was it mostly M&A work, or was it like leveraged? Like, you guys are putting on some leverage on the company.
Yeah, no. So with one company, we literally did a deal where we helped them acquire vessels, and those vessels were focused on commodity markets that basically failed right after that. And then the cash flows of those vessels wouldn't be able to support the underlying leverage they took on.
Yep. And
so 16 months later, we helped them raise like equity to bridge a lot of the covenant compliance there. Right.
Brutal.
And it's just like, like, I'm seeing all this and I'm seeing like,
but that's like
banking.
That's kind of bad timing too, right? Unlucky in terms of like people couldn't necessarily predict that commodity collapsing. I mean, maybe they could have. But
yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, I just I had a bad taste in my mouth. It's like, I'm so exposed to market risk.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to get, like, I think to your point, I'm kind of sounding it out. I wanted to de-risk that element of my career that it's so tied to the market. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So like, you wanted to get out of like the commodity oil gas space almost. And
I want to get, And I also wanted to get out of, I had offers to potentially join like Spotify or Netflix. And, I also was kind of weary about tech companies because I had seen my brothers go through like the .com boom, and I had seen all that stuff. Like, I had heard all these stories, so it kind of built up like a kind of like a gnawing kind of like risk aversion around me, right?
So like, I'm not going to go to that tech company, which is no cash flow and it's just growing fast top line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, I cut my teeth in like, like asset-based cash flow generating
companies,
right? Like, shipping companies are all like, they're like real estate, right? It's like a ship can generate X EBITDA,
right?
But it has to make its break-even point if it doesn't, beat its mortgage, right? It's like, it's very simple economics, right? But I'm cutting my teeth in this kind of thought process that's very like asset intensive.
Yeah.
And so anything that looks remotely asset light and just dependent on users and dependent on like user growth, I just didn't know it.
Yeah,
I didn't have the faith in it.
It feels risky. Yeah, and you, like you said, your brothers had some struggles with the .com, and so tell me. So you ended up doing what? Why don't you share what kind of the next jump and
yeah, and the next jump was more to say, okay, like, hey, I want to do like this long-term corporate thing, and I want to do, internal strategy for, a company and help drive initiatives forward. And I was like still like very googly-eyed about the whole strategy thing and, all these things. And then so I joined Barclays as a AVP within their strategy practice to help enhance process and improvement of how to run a wealth management platform. Right?
And was that a pay cut coming from banking? Because I can assume the bonuses weren't as crazy high, but since it was more like an internal, almost like a middle office, you're still C-suite, but like how does it, I guess easier way to ask is what was the pay like in that? Was it a cut? Yeah,
the pay from a base perspective was the same. Okay. But there was definitely not nearly any of the upside in terms of bonus.
And what about the hours? Like what about the hours?
It was like 10 to 20% bonus.
Got it.
But the hours were like 40 to 50 hours. Which is not bad.
It's a big deal. That's a big drop in hours.
Yeah, it was a big drop in hours. I was able to do a lot of different things.
Cool.
I was able to get involved in some like, nonprofit work and get more involved in my marriage, right?
Yeah.
But what I learned from there, again, was internal corporate is just all politics, right? And when you look at investment banking, the cool thing is you're transactional. You're selling. You're actively involved in projects. There's sprints. You're deep diving, and there's some sort of end to something, right? When you're in corporate, things just kind of linger on. There's constant kind of bickering of minutia that ends up being politically driven that doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day.
Right.
And so you feel disconnected from the change. The great thing about investment banking is that, you could be doing companies dirty by messing up their capital structure, but you are learning the art of selling. You're learning the fundamentals of how businesses run. You are actively working with C-suite clients, and you're kind of in it, right? I mean, probably the better counterpoint to anything of this is probably consulting, and being totally honest, because consulting offers all that in a long-term learning process and potentially a more smooth exit to internal corporate if that's your cup of tea.
Got it. Fair. Okay. So you're doing this internal corporate thing. It sounds like it wasn't the most enjoyable experience because it was, a lot of politics and stuff like that. And then eventually, so you started kind of, I'll call it a time of kind of your jumping here, to a few places. Is that fair?
No.
Or no?
I think it's jumping to one place.
Okay.
So we'll talk to that. Yeah. So I was really starting to read a lot more about the economy improving, and I started getting acclimated to all these like SaaS business models and kind of how these companies are growing. So that was like my nighttime reading, just really just learning, about what's going on in TechCrunch, learning about like Palantir Technologies, the ZocDoc, like all these companies just started coming up.
Yep.
Really, really, really heavily. So, at the end of my time at investment banking, I had actually interviewed for Teach for America. I thought I would really, really enjoy teaching and imparting knowledge on people. I really enjoyed being a coach for people. But I ended up not getting it. So actually my boss at Barclays was actually, negotiating his own exit package. He had actually interviewed at Wall Street Prep. He's like, look, this is a little bit too early stage for me, but if you're interested in this, you like financial modeling, you like analytics, and you like working with people, maybe this is something that you really want to look into. Because at that time, even the ed tech revolution was in full swing, like with the MOOCs and Coursera and Udacity. So Wall Street Prep appealed to me a lot because it was kind of a marriage of ed tech and my skill set. And I thought of this as a potential like pre-MBA opportunity where I could differentiate myself as an pre-MBA candidate and actually do something that's giving back to people. Right.
Yeah.
So I had interviewed at a lot of different startups. I had interviewed like at Newton and a couple other places, ZocDoc here and there. But I ended up going with Wall Street Prep. And the thesis for that was, hey, look, I still like corporate finance. I still like kind of like deals and analyzing transactions and companies, but I want to do it on, I really want to, see what this teaching thing is all about. I really wanted to understand my personality. I mean, I think the common theme around all this is that I'm still learning about where my strengths and weaknesses lie, or relative strengths and relative weaknesses lie.
So tell me about that transition to becoming almost like a teacher, really. I mean, you're still in financial modeling and still in your wheelhouse of expertise, but how was that transition? What did it feel like to go from doing deals to, doing live trainings and helping students?
I think like the element of it is that, if you enjoy performing, and I was always a performer, I played guitar in high school, and if you enjoy seeing people improve, if you have that kind of internal kind of like compass, then this job is really, really rewarding. That being said, I had to get my valuation stuff right. I had to go through like 2 months of rigorous training internally. I had to polish on my skills on how to present and how to make sure that I was, sharp on everything that I knew. I had to know the content inside and out.
Right.
And it's also like you're on the ground, on your feet for like 9 hours out of the day.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like, it's not a walk in the park by any means.
Yeah.
It's not like you're giving like it's not like you're giving like a 10-minute TED talk here, right? It's like for 9 hours, you're going through a 300-page deck. You are literally teaching people how to do a financial model for the first time sometimes.
Yeah.
You're teaching people the basics about like, hey, you shouldn't like, daisy chain links, or how do you run a sensitivity table, or how do you think about, doing some advanced lookups. I mean, it's definitely very grueling, but I felt like I felt in it because I was giving something of myself. Like my heart was in it. I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah, but you felt passionate about it. Like you could see you were helping kids that were trying to improve themselves, right? To make themselves
exactly.
Better. Yeah,
exactly. And
I get it.
And
my mother was a teacher. Yeah, my mother was a teacher. I get it. Yeah, she was a teacher.
Yeah, your mother's a teacher, and you're also part of this whole concept of actually informing people about what they're trying to get themselves into.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I want people to go in eyes wide open and not be drinking too much Kool-Aid. So it's good. You'll see in all of our social channels, we don't sugarcoat banking. We give the ugly too.
Exactly, right. And that's what gave me the ability to kind of tell my story. Like, hey, look, you call me lucky or unlucky, it doesn't really matter. Like, money is not like the only defining factor for me. It is a defining factor for me, but it was about, look, enjoy your experience and come into banking or consulting or whatever you want to do, but just be very cognizant of your decisions, because it's your career is important, but if your career isn't really that fully important for you, then you shouldn't really do something that's going to take you away from things that you really want to pursue. So I think that was what was really helpful for me, is when I was teaching, is that I was able to sprinkle in a lot of my war stories and impart that knowledge onto people.
Tell me one of your horror stories.
One of my horror stories.
I guess I assume from your banking days. From
my banking days, yeah. Oh man.
Or what's one of the funnier ones?
I remember like 2 months in, like I'm on this M&A deal for that company that we tried to help, buy vessels from, but to convince to buy vessels for, and literally like the VP of my team has just left. He was 6 years into the job and he was a star guy. He hired me, but he went to do something else in the Middle East, or in Houston, I think. And literally it's like the MD, me, who's like a very like green lateral first year analyst, and an intern who is this like little Asian dude, who's just really eager and passionate. And he's also really wicked smart. Like he's from, I think he was at Cornell, and he was an intern at Jefferies. So literally we're running this deal, and like it's the night before this M&A transaction is to close. And like this guy is like working on a couple of comps outputs for me, and he's like, "Hey, do you need me to stay here? And I'm like, hey, yeah, dude, you need to stay here, right? And so then he emails me like an hour later. He's like, hey, I'm just telling you, like, I'm gonna be here, and I'm just gonna take a nap in the closet on the 4th floor here. But you've got my back, and I'm here to stay for whatever we need. So he literally pulled an all-nighter with me, and he slept in the closet. And then like at like 8 in the morning, like the next day, one of the first-year analysts opens the door, and here's that guy just like tucked away in the middle of the closet, and he's like, oh my god, like I have to do his deal, right? So it's just a phenomenal kind of like moment.
So you didn't need him. He just was staying there just in case you needed him, kind of thing.
Effectively.
Yeah. And so he was still asleep when somebody walked in.
But he slept in the closet, and people found him there. And and I mean, look, I God bless him. That guy is literally like a director at Metalmark Capital now. So
nice.
he knows his shit. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like he's a good guy.
He's willing to put in the hard work as an intern. That's awesome.
He put in the hard work as an intern. Yeah.
Good for him.
Other stories are, dealing with like an associate who was from the Greek army, and he just had very high standards for everything that we wanted to put out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, there'd be times where he would call me like, you're a bitch, or like, you're this, you're that, like, get your act together. Like, and what people need to realize is that, you need to have a little bit of a thick skin in this business, and don't take yourself too seriously, right? Like sometimes the analysis that you're going to put out there is totally illustrative and bullshit, to the effect that it doesn't really matter, right? So you just have to kind of play the game there and just do what you're told, and don't think that you're smarter than your associate. I think one of the things that I always kind of, catch myself in is I feel like I know the game, and sometimes I feel like I'm too good to play the game, but nobody's too good to play the game, right? I think unless you're seeing something like just happening where like somebody's like snorting coke in the office, or somebody's like, sexually abusing somebody, like you should alert that. But other than that, like it's basically fair game.
If you're getting reamed out or whatever, chewed out, it's just like par for the course, is what you're saying.
It's par for the course. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of that is just people using their reverse psychology to just test your limits. So enjoy that, like embrace it. Like I think it's good to get rattled a bit, right? It's good for you.
Yeah. For sure. You're kind of putting yourself in a little bit of stress. So you're with Wall Street Prep for a good run there. And then tell me a little bit about your latest move. What's going on now?
Yeah. So I spent like 5 years at Wall Street Prep. I've also taught kids in private tutoring sessions. And one of my stories is that I've taught, like a kid who was like the son of like a massive institutional investor, where he was basically walked into like a Goldman Sachs internship, and his mom was having, lunch with Lloyd Blankfein during a Yankee game. And so was he. Right. Yeah. But like in 2014, I'm like, staffed for a private tutoring project that's at the Trump Soho, the former Trump Soho. And I'm going to this hotel, and there's this kid who, from a very rich family, and he's accompanied by this tutor I'm going to tutor the tutor who's going to end up tutoring the kid. That's what it's like.
That's crazy. Yeah. Okay. And so you're tutoring the tutor. Was the tutor able to pick it up fast enough, or would have been easier to tutor the kid?
The tutor, interestingly enough, runs his own like website, but he's like a Princeton grad and a hockey guy. He just likes to just like, work for this family. It's phenomenal. Right? It just doesn't make any sense. But it's out of the Twilight Zone. But, the guy that I end up tutoring, he has ADHD, and he also has a lot of pressure to feel like he has to perform. So, like, at the end, like, I gave him a pep talk, and he literally broke down on me.
Oh, man. That's sad.
Goes, you don't understand. Like, there's a lot of pressure, and I have to perform, and I'm from a rich family.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you just need to kind of take a chill pill, and you need to figure out what you want to do. The single most important thing is you need to figure out, for anybody, is figure out where you're going to leverage the most of your energy. Like, where is your passion going to lie?
Yeah.
That's what's going to take you through.
I 100% agree with that. I think the hard part with it, hearing that story is, everyone thinks the kid with money has it easy, but it's almost like they're starting on third base. No one else will give them credit for getting home. And it's like it's almost like they can never outlive that a little bit. And so everyone is always going to see any success they have as given to them, which is a really tough spot to be in, because anyone who wants to, they don't have to worry about, paying bills and whatnot, but just to kind of build your own path and find your own passion. I'm sure it can be depressing, right?
It's immensely depressing. I mean, I've taught similar kids like that. I mean, and it's hard for them to stay focused. Like, you would rather just go hang out with his girlfriend, his like Russian model girlfriend who I walked in, seeing in her, in her shorts, at 9 a.m. It's like, I'm here to fucking teach a course. Sorry for my French.
Yeah, no, that's
I'm
fine.
here to teach a course in corporate finance.
Mm-hmm.
But this beautiful Russian girl is sitting in the couch, right? So I don't know how to.
Are you having trouble focusing?
That.
Yeah. Fair enough. So okay, that's crazy, man. So you had this kind of one-off projects. That sounds like it was a pretty rare occurrence. However, it was one of those just strange twilight.
It's happened it's happened 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
I taught another girl who was the daughter of like a hedge fund tycoon who was like the protege of Carl Icahn.
Okay.
And had a very similar experience with her too. She kind of cried and said like, you don't understand and this and that. So
yeah,
I've used this time at Wall Street Prep to kind of understand that like everybody needs to understand that it's not that serious, that you just kind of have to go in and focus and give yourself time and find that right place for yourself to actually bloom. And you have to love yourself. So people really have to give themselves credit for what they're doing. And if they're really focused, but they're hard on themselves, they'll end up always feeling disappointed in themselves. Like, I think people need to really harness that strength inside to find, okay, how am I going to stay happy? I think that's like the most important question everybody has to ask themselves. And if they could do it by doing a 100-hour job and finding that place of happiness after they do their job, then that's good for them, right? It's not for everybody. Right?
Yeah, people should be optimizing for happiness, not money. I think that's really important.
Optimize for happiness, not money, and also just realize it's not that serious. Another piece of advice is like don't think that you're a hero. Like, at the end of the day, like, be a hero by staying in a soup kitchen and helping feed poor people. Be a hero by mentoring people. Be a hero by spending time with your mother and father who have, painstakingly, worked really hard for you to get on your 2 feet, right? I mean, take value in those things that are going to be longer lasting than a job. That's really, really important.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. So yeah, I think I love that. I think it's a really important message, and I think it gets lost in all the, hey, what technical interview question am I going to be asked in this hire view? It gets lost in all of that. So I appreciate you pointing that out. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about your last step, or maybe you don't want to talk about it. That's fine too. But just what's next for you in general?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think,
have you found yourself? Have you found what you like? Do you feel like you're still kind of searching and enjoying the path and the journey?
I think you have to keep things continuously interesting for yourself. I think if you go down a path and you find yourself really, really focused on one path, and then you look back and you're like, wow, I just did one thing for the past 20 years, you'll regret that. Right? Yeah. I think if you enjoy the journey and you try to find different aspects of what you want to solve, that keeps things interesting. So, while I was at Wall Street Prep, I took it upon myself to do a lot of, offsite CFO consulting for early stage companies. And I worked on some pretty cool things. One of them being, like a $5 billion startup that's run by a former, big time CEO. And, you could call me unlucky because I'm not working on that platform, but there's also some cultural considerations of why I wouldn't work with that tech CEO.
Right.
So you find your happiness in what you like doing. Like, I like helping solve problems. I like helping being restorative. So the teaching, the consulting, that really resonates with me. Right now, I've taken a break from Wall Street Prep full time because I've got a family and young kids. And so I've moved out of New York and I'm living in Washington, D.C. And I really like the education system here. And I like the fact that I could spend a little more time with my family. So I'm actually at a hospitality company doing corporate development. And so I'm taking all my experiences from franchising and investment banking and tech, and really it's coming into fruition where I could add value in a lot of different ways to support the CFO and head of corporate development of this hospitality company.
That's great.
And then I could really give the bankers a run for their money because I'm interfacing with them, right?
Oh, I'm sure they love that. Yeah.
Sorry?
I'm sure they love that. You're like, actually, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so it's nice to be able to call them on their BS because at the end of the day, the banker is a salesman. So
yeah,
I like that side of the equation. I like being at a publicly traded entity where I'm looking at the downstream effects of what a transaction does in terms of financial disclosure, strategic direction of the company.
Yeah.
You try to elevate yourself to an operator, right? And so, and like every banker is the same. If I'm talking to Goldman Sachs or Moelis or JP Morgan, I'm not going to take anything away from the fact that those guys are really smart or anything like that. But whenever we're having these conversations, it's like a script, right? Yeah. Of, okay, the buy side's going to talk in a certain way. The sell side's going to talk in a certain way. There's retrading of a potential M&A transaction. And then, all of the qualifying language that a banker comes with, like, this is very illustrative. This is high level. This is, we're not threading the needle here. Or the banker's going to say, I'm not an operator, but we think it works like this, right? Because the type of analysis that an investment banker is going to do is going to be very paper driven, very illustrative. Mm-hmm. It's not going to take into account the downstream effects of like, okay, how much do I have to spend to integrate this company into my business? Like, how do I think about the dyssynergies, or synergies?
Yeah.
How do I factor that in? So that's kind of the part of the analysis that I'm really focusing on. And I'm still leveraging a lot of like my financial modeling and structuring skills to support startups on the side. So I do consulting for early stage startups across different areas in different industries. And I think of myself as a guy who could probably get involved in private equity or VC, but I'm not desiring to, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
I have all the skill set that a buy-side professional could provide, but I'm doing it on my own terms.
Got it. No, that's fair. And it sounds like you have your priorities straight with getting more family time and especially with the young kids and all that. So that's great. So congrats on that.
No, I appreciate it.
I really appreciate you taking all the time to kind of come on the pod. Thank you so much. And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. And until next time.